Listening to the podcast When Life Gives You Lemons, presented by me, Emma Levy. Having worked with elite athletes for most of my career, it's always intrigued me that a significant number of high-performing individuals have encountered some form of adversity earlier in their lifetime. My fascination into this grew when I had my own brush with adversity, when I was diagnosed with breast cancer in May 2020, in the midst of the global pandemic at the age of just 36. During this period, I questioned whether it was my positive mindset or maybe something deeper which enabled me to bounce back and to train and compete for a triathlon just 1 month following completion of all active cancer treatment. The goal of this podcast is to explore this concept further by meeting a variety of high-performing individuals who have experienced adversity but who have come back stronger. So today I'm welcoming GB alpine ski racer Charlie Raposo to the podcast. Charlie is a professional ski racer competing in giant slalom. He is sponsored by Van Deer Red Bull and has been on the Team GB ski team for the previous 14 years. Charlie is a 5-time British champion and he had a great 2022 season, being the first British male to score World Cup points in giant slalom since 1968, ultimately finishing the season ranked 7 in the European Cup Giant Slalom standings and 37th in the World Cup Giant Slalom standings, which is no mean feat. Charlie is currently in Austria, where he is training and competing in the World Cup races, so I am super thankful for him for giving me some of his time to come and chat to us today. Hi Charlie, thank you so much for joining us today from Austria. I can see the snow in the window behind you, so I think your view is a little bit less gloomy than ours over here in North London.
Hello, Emma. Hello to all the listeners as well.
How's training going, Charlie?
Things are good. I've been out here now for a week. We had our first race of the year back in October 23rd. It's about 2 weeks ago. When I was home in London for a week and now back out here. Winter is definitely upon us. It's getting colder. We need more snow, of course.
Always.
We always do this time of the year, but it's nice to be back and it's nice to be, getting close to true winter as opposed to scrambling through summer skiing.
Yeah, I'm sure. So, Charlie, as you know, this podcast is called When Life Gives You Lemons. So we do like to start at the beginning of your story with your lemon. We've worked together over the past few years, so we have discussed previously that your father unfortunately died when you were younger. Are you happy to share with us a bit about that time of your life?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think it's funny you ask, and I'm doing this podcast now because it's something I'm starting to discover a lot about in the current years of my life. I say the latter years of my life. I was 8 when I lost my dad to lung cancer. Mm-hmm. He was a smoker, and that was, I think it's worth mentioning, that was just at the start of my ski journey. My stepdad had a place in Bordeaux in Switzerland, so I kind of just discovered this love for this new activity. My dad sadly passed away, and it was just my sister and I. She was 4.5 years older than me, and our mother. And obviously, our mother and our father had divorced about 2 years before, and that wasn't easy by any means, especially because my mom met my stepdad soon after, and he's been amazing. He's as close as you get to real dad.
Nice.
But I think, that sort of happened, and I was at boarding school in the UK because of that incident, and trying to stay close with family. But then just sort of, cracked on with life, I guess, and, just started to ski more because I wasn't, it is a weird way to look at it, but you are who you are because of things that have happened. I probably wouldn't have become a professional skier if he had stuck around, because I wouldn't have skied as much as a young kid. I would have been splitting holidays. So I wouldn't have been there, Christmas, New Year, half term, Easter every year from the age of, 8 until 11 when I started racing.
Yeah.
So, when life gives you lemons, kind of makes it lemonade.
Exactly.
That's kind of the lemonade, I guess, that happened for me. And I'm not sure he would have. My mum was a huge supporter of my career, and when I started racing at 11, and I started missing the entire, winter term at boarding school in the UK, and then after year 8, so after the common entrance exams in the UK, I was off to the US, to high school, to a ski academy, and again, I'm not sure that would have happened if he had stuck around. So that was all very interesting. But in the later years of your life, as you get older, you start to understand a little bit more about the relationships around you, and
Mm.
you start to create your own relationships,
Yeah.
romantic, and the relationship between, love and childhood trauma, and how that relates to my professional career, I don't yet know, but I'm sure that's
Hmm.
something I will discover through this journey,
Yeah.
of trying to understand a little bit more about the loss of my father at a young age.
Yeah. So you were at age 8, you were close to your father before he passed away?
Very close, but I think the crazy bit is how little you remember up until
Mm.
8 years old.
Yeah.
A lot of my memories come from films, from photos, from
Yeah.
videos. We shared a lot of passions, and a
Was
lot of
was he a skier
interests,
as well, your dad?
but not a skier at all. But we both were massive motorsport fans, and I
Okay.
actually raced go-karts until I was 14.
Oh wow.
So from the age of like 12, 14, I was doing that as well as skiing.
Hmm.
Um, so I think that it's just interesting. I think there's always that what if of like,
Yeah.
how would our relationship have grown? And
Yeah, of
that's
course.
probably as an adult what I miss the most.
Hmm.
Yes, I've got an amazing stepfather, an amazing mother who
Hmm.
does her best job to fill the shoes of both parents, and do her best for my sister and I. But at the end of the day, like not having my father, I certainly I just found myself like through my 20s, early 20s, late teens, like envy is kind of the wrong word because it kind of screams like negativity, and like sometimes I just feel like it's like jealousy in a negative way.
Hmm.
But I'd see, friends of mine with really close relationships with their dads, and
Yeah.
I'd sort of envy that connection with my own father.
Yeah.
And obviously that's what I don't have. So it would have been fascinating to have seen how that would have developed.
Yeah, of course. And so do you think, I think you were slightly alluding to the fact, has it had an impact on how you're moving forward with your relationships now as a grown up?
Massively.
Yeah. In what way?
Specifically, I mean, there's a lot of things that there's a lot of ways that I am as a person that are a byproduct of that environment, whether it be being massively attentive to detail, kind
Hmm.
of OCD, um, like to have as much of my life in order at all times.
Yeah.
I don't really like chaos around me. Like I like all of my stuff to kind of be controlled, and
Hmm.
like I like to know what's going on. I'm not good at just letting things go with the flow.
Yeah.
So I know my coach probably is one of the people that has the most difficult time with that.
Yeah.
When I want to know what the plan is, like 17 months in advance. But at the same time, I'll also be very spontaneous in my personal life, and like seeing friends. I'm not that good at like having a fixed plan to see X, Y, and Z person on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, for example.
Mm.
Um, but then yeah, in my sort of in my romantic life, it's understanding those triggers from that incident and the
Hmm.
things that make me feel a certain way. Like, look, love is vulnerable, so when you open yourself up to that, it brings back those feelings of being a young kid, and that's a little bit of
Yeah.
what I'm starting to understand as well. So
Yeah.
it's a journey across like all fronts of your life to
Of course.
understand how that one incident, regardless of like, when I was a 14, 15-year-old kid, you
Hmm.
like wouldn't, you wouldn't know, like it didn't bother me.
Yeah.
I was loving my ski racing. I was all in America. I wanted to live
Mm.
in the US.
Yeah.
I talked to my mum every day on the phone, but I barely see her. Like,
Hmm.
life was amazing. I had some great, like, fatherly, brotherly figures in my life, whether they be
Hmm.
coaches or friends or older athletes, whatever it was,
Yeah.
that played an important role in my life.
Yeah.
Um, so it wasn't sort of until, I became an adult and you start to see things from a different perspective that you start to understand that you need to address it. I guess I felt like I never really grieved.
Yeah.
Um, Kind of cracked on with life.
Hmm.
For better or worse, that was how we all dealt with it. And my sister and I have, in our later life, I think, looked back on it and dealt with it in different ways.
Yeah. Because you were quite young when you moved. You've mentioned it, but you moved to America, didn't you? When you were 14, you moved to America
Yes,
to
I went
a
to
like a ski academy. Is that right?
exactly. So I was living over there, like on campus at a ski academy.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'd see my mum. We'd never go more than 3 months without seeing each other. Maybe
Yeah.
she'd come over once in the fall. I would always come back to Europe for like a ski race or a trip or something, and she'd
Hmm.
be there
Yeah.
because obviously at the time I couldn't drive.
Yeah.
Um, she's got some pretty fond memories of some of the places she used to have to drive around Europe
I'm
to
sure. But
get me to races. Um,
but you speak about this
yeah,
time. You speak about this time quite positively, and that you had an amazing experience out in America. But you were very young, and you weren't seeing your family very often. Do you remember being lonely, feeling homesick at all?
not massively, no. At least not at the beginning. It was also exciting. I loved my new environment that I was in. I was
Hmm.
very used, I'd already done 2 years as a ski racer. I was used to being on the road. And I then headed over to the US and it was just easy. I slotted right in.
Hmm.
So my parents moved to Portugal when I was 16 years old. So
Hmm.
kind of halfway through my stint in the US. And that was tough because we no longer had a home base in the UK.
Yeah.
So, kind of planning where suitcases were going to be 3 months in advance and,
Hmm.
juggling stuff all around the world. I
Yeah.
had parents in Portugal. We still had the place in Switzerland, but it was rented a lot of the time during the winter.
Hmm.
And then I had like some ski racing in Europe, but
Yeah.
stuff in the US and like, yeah, it was
It's
it was
all
it
a
was
bit
hectic for
everywhere.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like that was definitely difficult. Now at 26,
Hmm.
um, I really crave the importance of like a home base.
Yeah.
Feel very unsettled when I don't have that. Like it's really important to me. A lot of people will go, yeah, I live in London. A lot of people will go, isn't that just crazy? Like, your flat's empty for some of the
Mm.
year. I'm like, yeah, but like there's no other way about it. Like
Yeah.
that's the unfortunate reality of being a ski racer. And guess what? Like if I worked in London, well, I'd be there every day of the week anyway, and
Yeah.
I'd be living in London spending more money. So like
Yeah. It's
kind
your
of just got
home.
to accept that like, yeah, it will be deem it
Exactly.
an asset. It will be an asset. It's empty, but that is very important for my own mind to
Yeah, of course.
feel feel like secure, I
Yeah.
suppose.
Yeah. So when you were out in America, you mentioned having kind of people that were looking after you. I mean, who were your kind of parent type figures if you needed adult help?
I mean, I think I was always in close touch with my mum. Like,
Mm.
we Skyped every day. Like we literally did speak every day.
Okay.
Obviously I was lucky that, access like this was I was just young enough to have Skype. Suddenly you got FaceTime audio, all of that stuff.
Hmm.
Um, I had a coach for 8 years from the age of 13 to 21,
Okay.
who actually coached me after I left the academy as well. He was a very big brotherly figure. He was like my advisor at the school, did my driving license in the US.
Yeah.
A couple of my friends' parents were like very, very much kind of like my American parents. One of my best friends over there, a guy called Brendan, his parents,
Hmm.
Anne Marie and Doug, the Todds, they were my home away from home.
Yeah.
The 50th reunion, 50th anniversary of our school is like next summer. Like
Yeah.
we'll all be staying at the Todds, I'm sure of it. There'll be like
Nice.
17 air mattresses. Everyone will be there. It'll be a riot.
Yeah.
It's kind of how it always was with them. So they were amazing.
So you
So I
grew
was
you
really
grew
lucky.
up you grew up quite young. You were quite young, living by yourself, but it sounds like,
Yeah.
you had to grow up quite young, really.
I,
And
I had to, and you have to in sport as well,
yeah.
because if you want to be any good at it, like you got to figure out how to like address some stuff. I was
Mm.
about to say another word, about yourself at a young age, and you've
Yeah.
got to be accountable to your actions. Otherwise, you're not going to progress.
Yeah.
Um, sure, I think there's lots of other ways to grow up quickly as a teenager, but I know sport was a huge part of why I grew up as quickly as I did.
Yeah.
I think I always wanted to be older.
Yeah.
Um, there's a lot of things in life I haven't experienced, and some people say, like, do you not regret not experiencing that, like a standard university experience? No,
Hmm.
there's
Yeah.
no part of me that wants to go like live in a kind of grotty dorm and like drink terrible alcohol and like party and like be dirty. No, I don't want to do that. I miss that. I'm okay missing that.
Yeah, of
Uh,
course. Yeah, you made
so
different
there's certain
choices.
areas of life.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, trust me, you should see some of the places we stayed at in Chile. Like that was worse than a dorm room for sure.
I'm sure.
But it was,
Mm.
amazing memories with great friends and like trying to progress and something that you have a huge amount of passion for was awesome.
Yeah, amazing. If we bring it to the current day, I mean, I know you haven't had a particularly easy start to the season. Will you tell our listeners the situation you're at with the funding at the moment? The British snow
Yeah,
sport,
I
GB
mean,
snow sport funding.
yeah, I think it's sort of just an unfortunate situation whereby, 6 of us on the World Cup team that have all had some big standout results. I mean, Dave Riding was the front cover of every newspaper in the UK last year. Not many athletes have achieved that in their careers.
Yeah.
On top of the rest of us having big breakthroughs. And unfortunately, that just wasn't really capitalized on from a business perspective by the people responsible for that. And a UK sport also made a decision that they didn't want to continue to fund Alpine, which was, to be honest, that decision I can be at peace with, because they want medals, and Alpine is not an easy sport to get medals in.
Yeah.
You know, they will fund sports that have a lot less depth in them that they can get, you know, back-to-back Olympic medals in. That's been proven. That's their model. Unfortunately, ski racing is an unpredictable sport. So we, you know, are going to rely on, you know, private funding and sponsors, and that's fine because it's a very it's a high market value sport, ski racing, and it can be very commercial. And you're selling an experience over viewership, even though viewership is super high. The ski racing viewership in the UK is more than Channel 4 cricket in the UK.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah, it's, you know, more people will tune in for a slalom World Cup race with Dave in it than they will for a full-on Wolverhampton game on TV. So I think that there's a big opportunity, but packaging that up and selling the experience of being able to come out to a race weekend with us, that's tricky. And I think that's the bit that hasn't quite been done right. And hopefully that will change moving forward, and the federation will potentially find better ways to do so. But only time will tell on that one.
So how's it going? Are you working hard on that at the moment? You helping to drive it forward?
I mean, look, we're all still skiing, so we're in business, but I don't think it's great, and it's not necessarily just about us either. It's about the future of British skiing. I'm lucky; I've got some great, amazing sponsors and partners behind me. Van der Red Bull Sports. I'm very lucky to be there. That's a project that is sort of going above and beyond what's ever been done in ski racing, at a very much privatized look at ski racing. So how exciting. That fits into what my future will look like will be interesting.
Cool.
So just kind of got to take it as it comes and see how this sport and how GB snow sport evolves over the next few years. Hope for the best.
I mean,
but at the end of the day, you know, like, as frustrated as we can be, it's out of our hands. You know, it is in the hands of our governing body, and
it's tricky. It's tricky. You know, from what I've seen over the years, you know, you come across a very passionate, motivated, driven athlete. Especially now you've lost your funding, you have to be even more driven. What do you think drives you?
It's an interesting question. There's a load of things that drive me within this sport. You know, because I never feel that I fall short on kind of think. You normally would yell at me for doing too much when I'd come and sit on the physio table over anything else. I enjoy that part of it. I enjoy being out and about. I enjoy the grind that comes with it. Like, the lows are weirdly enjoyable sometimes. Like, they suck and they make you want to kill stuff, but at the same time, like, you just kind of, like, it's all part of it, because you know it comes back to high. It always does. There's a high in there. Even when things are looking low for a while, then the high comes. You know, you just kind of keep believing, and you keep knowing that it's going to prevail.
So where are the highs for you? What are those highs in the sport?
I think those highs at the end, unfortunately, they come from results. The highs come from results. It comes from things going the way that you want them to. I mean, look, obviously the journey is so important in the sport of ski racing, because we're traveling the world, we're traveling with great people. So those are all important factors. But at the end of the day, like, we're doing this to win. And equally to make a living, but to win. Like, you could pay me way more money, but tell me that I'm never going to ski fast, and I probably wouldn't be happy doing this sport. Like, you are in it to succeed, prevail, ski to your limit, and have it work out. So I guess the driving factor is finding that feeling where you're on the limit and you do deliver on the result front. I mean, you can't fixate on the result. It's going to be what it's going to be. But you just got to execute the skiing that you want.
So do you enjoy the process? Do you enjoy the training?
Yeah, massively enjoy it. Look, there's definitely days where you wake up and you're tired, and you're putting a shed load of caffeine into your system, and that's how you're going, and you're being like overly positive to the point where like it's just definitely not the case. But you just got to crack on with it. Like it's kind of always something to take. I mean, right now is a prime example, Emma. Like we're battling with just rough conditions in Europe. It's rough conditions everywhere. The only place in the world with snow is like Colorado and Canada.
Right.
You know, North Scandinavia is super warm. Loads of national teams are up there, and it's like wet and salted snow. Down here in Europe, the glaciers are all really high and cold. So when they get snow, it just stays soft.
Yeah.
And then all the normal mountains, they don't have snow yet. And obviously, especially with the energy crisis, I think a lot of mountains are very apprehensive about blowing too much snow this year.
Yeah, I'm sure.
It takes so much power and water and energy.
Yeah.
So we've just been like struggling to get like training where we're like, this feels good. Like, oh, we're getting loads of feedback on the equipment and the material or whatever. Like, just kind of got to ride through it. Like, for sure, these days will be valuable when we get to good conditions. And like, I've just got a lot of stuff in the locker that hasn't necessarily felt good, but it's been productive.
Yeah.
So you just kind of have to reframe sometimes as to what you're expecting out of that current day and moment in time.
Yeah.
And do your best to sort of feel good about it, really.
Yeah. So you're encountering a lot of challenges along the way, really.
Yeah, this sport is not smooth sailing. This is like it's challenges every day.
So you've got to be resilient. I'm wondering if you think that, you know, losing your dad early has affected your career as a skier and, you know, helped you to ultimately get to where you are. Has it helped you be more resilient, do you think?
It's a very interesting question. I'm not sure, you know, we talk about resilience and grit a lot in sport, and I'm not sure that losing my dad young necessarily gave me loads of grit and resilience. It's just different, like emotional resilience. Like in ski racing, you're failing a lot. You're feeling a lot of disappointment. You're not necessarily like feeling trauma. So it's kind of different emotions, but I'm sure there's some element to it. Like I've always had very thick skin. Like, yeah, most people will talk about me sort of having the thickest skin that they know. You know, I can sort of just take shit over and over again, like in quite a fun way. Like it's always just banterous, and like sometimes people can take it back, sometimes people are less good at taking it back, and they dish it out and then can't take it. But yeah, I think it's certainly there's got to be some crossover. There's got to be. You know, otherwise I just learnt it from sport.
Yeah. Potentially, but you know, potentially the theory goes, doesn't it? If you experience, you know, a large adversity earlier in your lifetime, you've dealt with something really tricky, then in the future, when you're dealing with other tricky incidents in your sport, they're kind of easy compared to what you've been through before.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, tough to say. Like I was fortunate in other ways with how I grew up. You know, I think there's a huge see it a lot of the time. There's a huge comparison, like with adversity as far as opportunities for young athletes who then, like, you know, world champions and the greatest of all times have often come from like a very difficult situation, whether it be family or sometimes financial, to be honest. And I think that puts, you know, for lack of a better expression, you know, hair on one's chest. Or you know builds that resilience for young athletes in a way that then just allows them to just keep pushing and getting the most out of themselves. You know, my adversity, was losing my dad young, and it wasn't while I was an athlete, so I'm just not sure. I don't necessarily know yet what the crossover is, but I'm sure it's got to be something.
Did you always want to be an athlete, or did your kind of ambitions change as you grew up?
No, not really. You know, I enjoyed sport at prep school, but I wasn't super sporty. You know, I wasn't like I could sprint fast. So, you know, I was on the relay team at my prep school, and I played a couple games first 15 rugby, but not a lot. Like I wasn't consistently there. I was small. I was quite scrawny. I started this skiing thing, and it's actually an interesting like year 4 piece of homework where like Charlie's written down the page and you got to write a sentence off each letter, and the I was I want to be an Olympic skier. I had no idea what ski racing was or competitive skiing was, but I'd just seen the Athens Olympics, and I knew that, you know, that the Greeks, they went to this Olympic thing, you know, like obviously how the Olympics started, and that's what, you know, that's where all the greatest went. So there must be something for this sport of skiing.
Yeah.
There's clearly like some kind of, you know, deep-seatedness in me to want to be an athlete. My mum was a show jumper.
Okay.
But it was that, I guess once I started skiing, like that was what I wanted to do. Like from a very early age, I wanted to be a ski racer.
Yeah.
As in when I started ski racing, I wanted to be a World Cup ski racer.
Yeah.
At a very early age, and that's just kind of kept plucking away at it.
Amazing.
You know?
I mean, interesting how you said at the beginning how because of your stepdad having a place somewhere in the, I think you said in the Alps, you know, that kind of laid out the path for you to become a skier. And, you know, it's interesting, like you said, if that hadn't have happened, who knows, maybe you wouldn't have been a skier today.
Exactly. And like, I wouldn't have seen myself doing any other sport because although I was racing karts, you know, my family wouldn't have been able to support that. Like they didn't have the money for that. And unless you start really young and get picked up by a young drivers program at a very young age, you're not, you got to have a lot of money for sport. And my stepdad was the one supporting that little passion project, and that wouldn't have worked out. So I think that, I'm not sure why ski racing was the one that just worked for me. I guess I kind of believe that like everyone's got something in them that they're going to be really good at, but a lot of people maybe don't discover it in their lifetime.
Do you have any specific strategies which you think have helped drive you forward over the years? Anything specific that you've used to help you get to where you are today?
Interesting one. I'm not sure. I think a big part was like starting to understand like who I am as a person, and then like planning, you know, my career and my decisions around that. Like I'm about as extroverted as it comes with athletes.
Yeah.
And like that's different. A lot of athletes are quite introverted or like extrovert, introvert. But there's very little of me that's an introvert. Yeah. So learning how to sort of adapt with that and utilize that in the best way possible, I think that became a big asset in the last couple of years. I'm really starting to understand like who I am and like, so what do I need to be able to keep doing this sport to the best of my ability? And like, what stimulus do I need to be sort of happy? Like if an athlete's happy, you're halfway there, you know, like 100%, you know? So it's like keeping the environment around me good is sort of, priority.
Yeah. And so how did you work that out? How did you kind of analyze that situation? Was that with the help of a therapist or was that just on your own you worked out?
I think I started to know that, you know, I saw the coach I had for a very long time. You know, I think kind of he had a vision for how I should have been as an athlete instead of like this, like, so Charlie needs to be that to be an athlete instead of like, this is Charlie, how do we make Charlie good?
Yeah.
And that was sort of the shift, my most recent mental coach that I started working with a few years ago. You know, starting to understand like a little bit more about myself and like, so what do I need around me? Like community, like I'm a team sport athlete and an individual sport.
Yeah. So you like to have a team around you to support you.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just managing that accordingly, really, and like and like make sure that I take the time that I need, because as much as I might be extrovert, like sometimes you need to be alone to like recharge and like just take it easy for a hot second. I don't need a lot of taking it easy, but I do need some levels of it to be, you know, calm and prepared.
Yeah, absolutely. You need some downtime to recover. If we kind of if we start to wrap this up, if I can ask you one final question, if you can go back in time to when things were, you know, at their toughest, what do you wish you could have told your young self as you were going through your hard times?
That's an interesting one, because actually I don't necessarily remember like all the tough times that much. Like there have been like some really tough times in my ski career. Yeah. All like tough times losing my dad, but everything always works out. Like I just kind of believe that. Like even at the darkest of times, you know, like I lost my dad, like, but I'm here and I don't always get things right. I'm not always like the best person in the world. I always try to, you know, make the right decisions and do right by all the people around me and be the best version of myself. But like everything's kind of all right. And like there have been moments in my career where, I mean, hell, last season, February 9th, I was driving from Lake Placid, New York, back down to New York City with my coach and my technician in the back of a rental Suburban, Chevy Suburban, just being like, God damn, like, I don't know if this sport's for me anymore. Like, where everything's gone. I was training well, but I couldn't race well.
Mm-hmm.
A month later, a month and a few days later, I was making history for Great Britain and like making a huge jump in my own career. And, like that, things change. So it's just, I think no matter how tough things are in the moment, like speak. That's super important. Like a lot of people bury their difficulties. I mean, everyone's got their own battles and it's all relative. Like my bag of issues is tiny compared to someone else who will be fighting loads of mental health issues and all the rest of it. But again, like things are all relative. I think just there's always someone that's going to listen. There's always someone that's going to speak to you and want to hear you and want to help you. And like, I feel so alone some of the time as an athlete, like athletes do. And like, I always feel guilty saying this.
Yeah.
But I've just kind of also got to the point where I'm no longer going to feel guilty. Like, listening to a podcast the other day with Daniel Ricciardo's performance coach, a really close friend of his. He's been on the road with him for 5 years, and he's talking about like how lonely the existence can be on the road as an athlete.
Yeah.
And, he addresses, he's like, I know people look at it and go, Daniel's making however many millions, more millions than you could ever need in life. And anyone from the outside will just go, oh, why is that person having a hard time? Like, they've got all the money in the world. Like money at the end of the day is like nothing on happiness, and sport pushes you to a point mentally which can be quite difficult, and it's a lot of time away from family and in your own head, and a lot of pressure in a small amount of time. In business, like you can be the 10,000th best businessman in the world and still be doing super well and growing and getting better. In sport, there's a very small space to be really good at something.
Yeah.
So I think it's just that no matter like how tough things get, like things will always work out.
Nice.
Things always will, whether you're going through a hard time yourself or like as in like you yourself are fighting your own battles or you lose someone close to you. It's just always trying to reframe things and like spin things into positivity and like get out of a spiral, because like we all spiral, we all get like worked up and it gets worse. And so yeah, I think that's it. Like things always work out.
Yeah. So communicate and believe basically is what I've taken to.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's on such a like macro and micro level. Like I'm talking on that on like my ski racing, like race to race, like it will always work out. But then also like the macro level of like life, I just think it will always work out. Like even when you get pushed into a corner, like a lot of people find their ways out.
Things will always work out. I like that. We can finish with that one. Thank you, Charlie. I really, really appreciate you giving up your time today.
Oh, it was really nice to have this chat. It's a different chat than I would normally have on a podcast.
Yeah, which is brilliant. And, like I said, I've worked with you before. I know you are a damn hard worker and you are resilient. And I think, keep going and, I'm sure you'll achieve your top 30 goal. Yeah. And on to 2026 Milan Winter Olympics. That's the goal.
In a little while, but I'm sure we'll also be there soon, very soon.
Brilliant.
Actually. Yeah.
Good luck, Charlie. Nice to speak to you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
We're so excited that the first series of When Life Gives You Lemons is sponsored by Co's Linen. Co's supply some of the UK's finest hotels with luxury linens, including bedding, towels and bathrobes. So if you want to feel like you're on holiday or a spa break every day, then I can highly recommend their products. I really love my personalised bathrobe. You know that feeling when you've had a long day at work or a really hard workout? That's when all I want is to have a hot bath, dry myself in my fluffy Co's towel and then relax on the sofa. And that is when you'll find me in my Co's bathrobe. Honestly, the most cosy item I've ever owned. All products can be personalised with custom monograms designed by leading interior designer Sophie Patterson. You can find them exclusively online at www.coslinen.com. Listeners to When Life Gives You Lemons can save 10% with the discount code POD10 10. You can find a link in the show notes.